What is going on, you guys? This is the Q-Bone here, and as you can see, I'm wearing teal and black like a Duval cat, because that must mean I'm here to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Today's video is my first installment of a new series that I'm starting called the Teal and Black Review and Preview Show. So the way this is going to work is fairly simple. I'm going to review last week for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then afterwards, I'll preview the next upcoming week for Jacksonville as well. Without wasting your time, let's go ahead and get started. So obviously, before we talk about the next week's opponent, which is the Indianapolis Colts, let's go rewind a little bit and talk about last week, where the Jacksonville Jaguars lost to the Washington Commanders in Week 1 by a score of 28-22. Oh man, Louis T, if you're watching this, I hope you are. Yeah, you know what I had to do on Twitter after after the score. It was not fun. For those who don't know, I had to eat Ovaltine on camera, and it was not fun. Not fun. I used to do that a lot when I was younger. My sister used to trick me into eating Ovaltine, and to me it was just chocolate, But for some reason, I just did it recently, last Sunday, and God, it was terrible. Like, first of all, I had to go and buy some Ovaltine, and second, I don't know what it was. Maybe they changed the formula or recipe for it or whatever. But good God, it was thick. It was all gluey and just it was awful. So yeah, that's what I had to do, because I said, no, the Jaguars are going to win this game, and they did not win this game. They almost did, but they didn't. Let's go ahead and talk about the 3 takeaways I had from this Week 1 game for the Jaguars. First things first, got to talk about the offense and how this offense struggled at times. And it's not every aspect of the offense. Obviously, Christian Kirk, really good. He had a pretty good game, had over 100 yards receiving. Zay Jones had 6 catches for about 60 yards or so he was pretty good. James Robinson had a great game. He had 11 carries for 66 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns, one in the air, one on the ground. And considering the fact that he was coming back from a torn Achilles, that is amazing to see him back on the field in Week 1, which I didn't expect. I did not expect him to be on the field in Week 1. And Travis Etienne also, don't want to ignore him. He had some nice plays here and there for the Jaguars. But I'm mainly talking about Jacksonville's offensive line, as well as the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. My guy, as I like to always say. And first things first, this offensive line, they had their hands full this game. They absolutely had their hands full. There's a reason why Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, and Juwan Payne were all selected in the first round. Okay, those guys are pretty good football players. And not only that, they didn't even have Chase Young, but they were giving Jacksonville all types of hell on that offensive line. Or defensive line, however you want to put it. But they were just getting after the quarterback. They didn't get a lot of sacks, but they were getting after Trevor, making him uncomfortable, forcing him to have 2 intentional grounding plays that really hurt this offense. And speaking of the penalties, this team was penalized. I think I have the number here. Let's see. 13 penalties for 90 yards. Good grief. You're not going to win football games very often when you have that many penalties. But they also had a time of possession of 27 minutes and 3 seconds. So Washington had the football a lot longer than Jacksonville did. And even though they didn't have many turnovers, the only real turnover in the game for Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence threw an interception. a desperation throw, on third down late in the game. By then, though, it was like, the score was already 28-22. There was less than 2 minutes left. So, yeah, you got to do better to take care of the football, but at the same time, like, it's not like, oh, he threw it right to the defender that was just sitting there. It's not something like that. But even still, Trevor didn't look good. I usually try to defend Trevor. Trevor didn't look good in this game. In fact, he looked like absolute garbanzo beans. Especially in the first half. Specifically in the first half, he looked terrible. I don't have access to watch the games live, so what I have to do is I have to listen to the radio network, and then I rewatch the game as soon as it ends, once it's available on NFL Plus. But, my God, like, the guys in the broadcast booth, they were just constantly saying, if Trevor makes that throw, that's a touchdown. If Trevor makes that throw, that's a third down conversion. If Trevor makes that throw, that's a big gain. Like, there was at least 3 opportunities Jacksonville could have scored in the red zone for a touchdown. If Trevor just puts the ball in the right spot, that's a touchdown, to Travis Etienne or Zay Jones. But didn't happen. And speaking of in the red zone, Jacksonville had their first 3 trips to the red zone. They only came away with 3 points. Like, that's not good. That's how you lose football games, folks. That score should have been a lot higher than 22 for us. We should have had more than 22 points, but it didn't happen. Trevor just didn't play good. And it's not something I can defend. He's got to make his throws. The offensive line's got to protect him. In the key moments, the offensive line has to protect him. And, I talk about Carson Wentz, how I don't think he's a good quarterback. But give Washington credit. In the key moments, and give Carson Wentz credit too. In the key moments, Washington protected Carson, and Carson made the throw to either Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson, Paris Campbell. Well, not Paris Campbell. Who's the other guy I'm thinking of from Ohio State? Curtis Samuel. That's who I'm thinking of. Washington has weapons galore to work with. And not to mention, they have Antonio Gibson, and they had J.D. McKissick in the running back group. So they had weapons galore. So while, yeah, the defense had, like, its issues too, the defense, while, yeah, it struggled. I mean, it's Terry McLaurin. Like, I'm not going to expect them to completely shut down Terry McLaurin. All right? I'm not going to completely expect them to shut down, a Jahan Dotson who is a rookie and we don't even know if he's going to be great or not. But he balled out in that game. But I know what I was expecting out of this offense. And I expected better from Trevor. And he didn't show up. He just flat out didn't show up. The second key takeaway that I have is Trayvon is number 1. I think it's safe to say Trayvon Walker showed in this game why he was the number 1 overall pick. The 1 sack in the game for Jacksonville was by Trayvon Walker on a great play around the right tackle. Got underneath him and just zipped right past. Usually you see him beat offensive tackles sort of through power. He just went all around him. Didn't even bother going through him. Just went around him. And another thing that Trayvon did in this game, he had an unbelievable interception on a screen pass. Normally, guys can't make an intercept. Guys like Trayvon Walker, who are 275, 6'5", or some ridiculous like that. Big man, all right? A big man doesn't make that play normally. But for some reason, he's just like, give me that ball. He just swiped it out of the air. And of course, that play afterwards, James Robinson just ran it in for a touchdown because they were so close to the end zone at that point. But there was a lot of concerns and a lot of questions whether or not Trayvon was going to, was he going to be the right pick at number 1? And should it have been Aiden Hutchinson or Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal or Thibodeau, or is it Thibodeau? I don't know how you pronounce that name anymore. But no, Trayvon showed why he was number 1 today. Or excuse me, not today, but last Sunday. He showed why he was number 1. And third, and finally, my third takeaway from this game was, despite the fact that there were huge offensive struggles at my first takeaway, my third takeaway is that, despite all the odds, the team shows promise. I don't know if they're going to be able to get to that 12-5 mark that I originally had, predicted early in, before the season started. Yes. If you didn't know, I picked this team to go 12-5. Go ahead and make fun of me in the comment section down below. It sounds ridiculous. It's delusional. Duval-lusional if you want even to go that far. But they showed some promise in this game. They were down 14-3 at halftime. And then at some point, the game was at 22-14. And they had the lead. So even though they're down in a hole, they didn't quit. And like I said, I mentioned, Christian Kirk had a good game. Zay Jones had a good game. Evan Ingram had a pretty good game. James Robinson had a good game. Maybe a bit underutilized, but he's coming off an Achilles, so I'm not going to criticize that decision. But Travis Etienne had some nice plays. Tyson Campbell had a really good interception, I believe in the third or fourth quarter, that helped put points up on the board. Obviously, Trayvon Walker did a really good job in this game. Not only just stopping the run, but also getting to the quarterback, making a play on the ball via an interception. I believe Josh Allen forced a fumble in this game as well. I believe it was Josh Allen. Devin Lloyd made a nice play on a 2-point conversion. As a unit, they pretty much limited Washington to only 80 yards rushing as a team. That's pretty good. And that's going to be an important thing to note, because next week they're going to have to go up against one of the best in the league in Jonathan Taylor. So those are my 3 takeaways from the Week 1 game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Washington Commanders. Before we go over to the preview section of the video, one little more spot I have written down here at the very tiny bottom corner over here is what I call the AFC South Roundup. Every week I'm going to be doing, when I do these videos, I'm going to keep track of the AFC South, because that is the division that the Jacksonville Jaguars play in. So I'm going to keep you guys updated on the record, who's in first, who still has a chance to make it to the playoffs, all this and that. And after Week 1, some way, somehow, nobody won last week for the AFC South. Not a single person, which is ridiculous because, as you can see, Indianapolis and Houston have a tie because they played each other. And somehow, Houston was up 20-3 at one point. Indianapolis came back late, tied the game up. The game went into overtime. Indianapolis had multiple attempts, from my understanding, to kick the ball for a field goal to win the game. I know they at least had one opportunity and they missed. And that game ended in a tie. So Houston and Indianapolis sit up at the top of the division with 0-1 records. No wins, no losses, but a tie. Tennessee and Jacksonville sit down at 0-1. We know what happened to Jacksonville. They lost to the Commanders, but the Tennessee Titans hosted the New York Football Giants, and the Giants came back from a deficit. They looked dead in the water in the first half, and they came back and they won the game. And it's unfortunate. Tennessee had an opportunity to win the game. There was like 4 seconds left when they tried a field goal to try to win the game. The score was 21-20 at the time. It went a little bit, the kicker kind of shanked it a little bit too far to the side. Time ran out. Tennessee lost. You hate to lose games that way, but As of right now, both the Jaguars and the Titans sit at 0-1. So that's your AFC South Roundup. And now, folks, we finally reach part 2 of this video, which is the preview portion of the video, where now we're going to be looking ahead at this upcoming Sunday, where the Jacksonville Jaguars will have their first home game of the season. And it will be against a familiar opponent, the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this was the same Indianapolis Colts, obviously, that we played in Week 18 of last year, our last home game of the season. So, very fitting that the next home game that we would play would be against the Colts once again. So, this is a bit interesting. It's almost like the exact same Colts team as last year. 1 or 2 changes here and there. But the biggest change, obviously, Matt Ryan is the new quarterback in town for Indianapolis. And the stats for that Matt Ryan had last week, he was 32 of 50 for 352 yards, a touchdown, and 1 interception. And of course, Jonathan Taylor had an unbelievable game, monster game. He had 31 attempts for 161 yards and 1 touchdown. Excuse me. One thing to also add to that is that Jonathan Taylor also had 4 catches for 14 yards. So he touched the ball 35 times for 175 yards, folks. It's a lot of work. From that position, that's a lot of work for one guy. And the last person I wanted to highlight from the Indianapolis Colts, Michael Pittman Jr. had 9 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown last week against the Texans. One thing to also point out, the Colts didn't have their best defensive player, in my opinion, in Leonard. They didn't have him. He wasn't available in this game. I don't know what the extent of his injury was or what the reasoning was. I didn't get a chance to look at their injury report, but he didn't play in this game. So I'm going to be keeping my eye out for the injury report this week, because that is a huge loss for the Colts if he's not able to go. He's one of the better linebackers in the league. You really want to see him on the field if you're a Colts fan. So hopefully he does come back soon. I don't know the extent. I'll put up what his injury, what injury issue he has on the screen now before I act like an idiot. But hopefully he comes back soon if you're a Colts fan. I'll just leave it at that. And even with them not having their linebacker, Darius Leonard, I'm still not used to him calling him Shaq. I almost call him Shaq Griffin, Shaq Leonard yet, but or Shaquille Leonard. I'm still gonna just call him Darius Leonard because it's easier for me. But even though they didn't have Leonard, they still have guys like Yannick Ngakoue, a former Jaguar. They still have who is it? DeForest Buckner at defensive line. So similar to last week where, Jacksonville had some struggles, on the offensive line protecting Trevor Lawrence. They're going to have their hands full, I believe, again this week with those 2 guys in particular. I know damn well Yannick's going to get after Trevor Lawrence. I know damn well that the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts, Gus Bradley, our former head coach, which reminds me, how is it that first 2 weeks of the season, the Jacksonville Jaguars have to play against a team whose defensive coordinator used to be the head coach of the Jaguars? How is that possible? Why is that a thing? I don't know why that is, but I know Gus Bradley is probably going to really want to win this game. And finally, what I want to talk about now in the preview section is I have 3 things down, but the keys to victory for the Jacksonville Jaguars against their Indianapolis Colts. So I think first and foremost, it's pretty obvious. See that number right here? See this number right here? Jonathan Taylor, those rushing yards. He had 161. That's what it's got to be on Sunday. You got to hold him to at least 70 yards on the ground. If you do that, I think Jacksonville has a really good chance to win this game. And Jacksonville, like I said, they are really good at stopping the run. They only held the Washington Commanders to 80 yards or like 80, 85 yards rushing for like a 3 yards per carry on average or something like that. If they can do that against Jonathan Taylor, I think it's going to really help boost their chances at winning this game, because I don't have a whole lot of respect on Matt Ryan and the passing game. Not to say that Matt Ryan is, terrible, but he's getting up there in age. He's running on fumes, in my opinion. Why are you having this man throw 50 times? Another thing I want to point out, why I want to mention, stopping Jonathan Taylor at all costs, is because outside of Michael Pittman Jr., I don't really think Indianapolis has really that many receivers that really scare you. Pittman's, you gotta keep your eye on him. You always gotta keep your eye on him. Not necessarily on like the level of, say, Terry McLaurin from last week, but you still got, look at this. 9 catches for 121 yards. That's no cupcake numbers. Those are some stats there. But other than that, Matt Ryan, he had 32 completions, but they were all like, okay, 2 to you, 2 to you, 3 to you. Jonathan Taylor, I'll give 4 to you because you're special. They don't really have a whole lot of weapons to work with, which still boggles my mind that they threw it 50 times with Matt Ryan. Though granted, like I said, they went into overtime, so that number's a bit, inflated because of it. But even still, I still think that's a little bit too much, in my opinion. For a guy like Matt Ryan, who's up there in age and who I think is sort of running on fumes, you don't want him throwing that many times in a game. Or at least, if I'm a Colts fan, I would not want to see him constantly throwing it that many times a game. Second thing that I have down for keys to victory is being balanced, specifically on offense. And the reason why I say that is because for some reason, I understand the reason why, but with all those struggles I was talking about with Trevor Lawrence, not being accurate on his throws, especially in the first half of the game. In the second half of the game, he cleaned it up. He was a lot more efficient. But I got his numbers right here for you. Let me pull that up. 24 completions on 42 attempts for 275 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. I don't like that. All right, I don't like that at all. I don't like the fact that he had 42 attempts. That is way too high for me. Unless you have an offense that has, like the Washington's pass catchers, or they have, the trio in Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. If you have a guy that's just like super dominant, a guy like Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, one of those guys. Okay, having 42 attempts isn't that bad. I won't criticize you that much, but we don't have the weapons for that kind of an offense. I want that number to be down to around, at most, 35. At most, 35. I want to see more runs with James Robinson. I want to see more runs with Travis Etienne. Have Trevor Lawrence have a couple of runs too. Have him have 1 or 2 design runs, because he's pretty athletic. And I don't think they used his legs at all really in this game against Washington, which really upset me because he's been very effective when he does run with the football. But I don't know why they just chose not to. Or maybe they did try it with read option run, but Trevor just decided to give the ball off to James Robinson. Maybe that was the case, but even still, you got to be more balanced. Too many pass attempts last week. Take that number down. Have the rush attempts go up, especially since, James Robinson and Travis Etienne combined only had 15 attempts. But they had over 100 yards combined, rushing. But only 15 attempts. And I know Doug Peterson said, in his press conference, he only wants to run the football when it's effective. And even still, though, like, if you run the football, regardless if you're effective or not, you're going to be effective with James Robinson. I'm going to say that right now. You're going to be effective with Travis Etienne. I'm just going to say that right now. But running the football more often, like, those guys should have another 5 carries each, in my opinion. So if you do that, then those offensive struggles probably go away. Now the defense has to respect the run, so it opens up things in the play action. Now they have to respect Travis Etienne and James Robinson so that on read options, Trevor can actually take it and run off. So they have to be a little bit more balanced on offense. And finally, the third and final key to victory for me is to stay disciplined. I want to say I mentioned it earlier in the video, but if I didn't, I'll say it again. This team had 13 penalties for 90 yards. That is not a recipe for success whatsoever. Ideally, you don't want any penalties at all. But penalties, they happen. But some of those penalties were just really. How do we have 2 intentional groundings? Why is DeJuan Smoot getting a personal foul? Like it's those kind of penalties, the stupid penalties, the ones that, the false starts and the offsides, that kind of stuff. Like, that kind of stuff needs to go. Those penalties are momentum killers. They just kill your momentum. They make you just hang your head down. You get upset and you don't want to kick the dirt and you don't want to play. You get exhausted. You have to stay on the field longer than you have to. Got to be disciplined. So, before I end this video, I want to give you guys my prediction of who do I think is going to win this game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is actually, I kind of go back and forth on this because on one hand, my gut is kind of telling me, the Colts are going to win this game. Because Jonathan Taylor, I think, is going to actually maybe not go as crazy as going over 150 yards on the ground, but or 160 even at that point. But I think he's going to at least get up to maybe 80, 85, 90, around that ballpark with maybe a touchdown or 2 here and there. The question is going to be, how well is this offense going to be in the first half? Are they going to get in another situation where they're down 14-3 at halftime? If that's the case, I have my concerns. But at the same time, for some reason, Indianapolis does struggle in Jacksonville. I don't know what the reason behind that is. It's just they haven't won there since 2014. Or 2014 was the last time they won in Jacksonville, is what I'm trying to say. But, so, it's weird. It's kind of like, on one hand, the Colts look pretty good to win this game, but at the same time, Jacksonville, I think, is prepared enough to win this game, But I'll go with the team that I feel like I trust the most in this game. And I hate to say it, but I think I trust the Colts to win this game. Mostly because I want to see those offensive struggles I mentioned and all those penalties and stuff go away first before I can feel confident enough to say, okay, Jacksonville's going to mollywop these garbanzo bean Colts. But I don't know if they're there yet. After watching that week 1 game against the Commanders, I don't really know if they're going to be there yet. So I'm going to go with a bit of a gutsy call, I guess you would say. I want to trust my gut and not my head, because my head's telling me that the Jaguars are going to win this game because, Colts struggle in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville's good at stopping the run. But I'm going to go with the Colts. I'm going to go with the Colts, score being 21-17. That's going to be my score. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you're a Jaguars fan, a Colts fan, or something like that. Expect this as a weekly series for Jacksonville. So, with that being said, folks, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.